Even though Mr. Bezos can afford all of these mansions and his $500 million yacht and his rocket ship, Mr. Bezos refuses to pay his workers at Amazon decent wages, decent benefits, or provide decent working conditions. Year after year, with very little debate, we pour hundreds of billions of dollars into the military-industrial complex. This year, it's about $900 billion. While defense contractors make huge profits, while the Pentagon remains unaudited, with massive waste and fraud, we now spend more than the next 10 nations combined. Enough is enough. It's time to change our national priorities, and cutting military spending by 10% is a good way to begin. Last year, drug companies hired over 1,700 lobbyists. There are 535 members of Congress. They got 1,700 lobbyists from the pharmaceutical industry, 3 lobbyists for every member of Congress. Meanwhile, as Americans die because they cannot afford the medications they need, the pharmaceutical industry makes higher profits every year. At a time when we are looking at more income and wealth inequality than at any time in American history, this budget resolution offered by Senator Paul would move us in exactly the wrong direction and make a bad situation worse. An historic union victory was achieved nearly 1 month ago by Amazon workers in Staten Island. Amazon is one of the most profitable and one of the most powerful corporations in America. It is also one of the largest employers in our country, with close to 1 million workers. We are talking, when we talk about Amazon, about a company that made a record-breaking $36 billion in profit last year, $36 billion. And that was a 453% increase from where it was before the pandemic. Workers throughout this country are now in the process of organizing unions at a grassroots level and are prepared to go out on strike when the greed of large corporations prevents them from receiving decent wages and decent benefits. President, our health care system is broken. 85 million Americans are uninsured or underinsured, and we don't even have enough doctors, nurses, or mental health providers. Unbelievably, our life expectancy is actually declining. Our child care system is dysfunctional. Millions of parents unable to find affordable sites for their kids. We have a major housing crisis. 600,000 Americans are homeless. And, oh yes, the planet is on fire, and the world we are leaving future generations will be increasingly unhealthy. But somehow, we never have enough money to address those crises. Mr. President, if we have learned anything about the COVID pandemic, where we have lost over 1 million Americans, and climate change, which is causing massive destruction throughout the world, it is that national security is not just about nuclear weapons, submarines, and fighter planes. It's about making sure that all Americans have decent health care, education, housing, and other necessities of life. So what this budget resolution brought forth by Senator Paul does is exactly the opposite of what we should be doing. Instead of expanding Medicare to make sure that every man, woman, and child in this country has health care as a human right, this is a budget that would lead to devastating cuts to Medicare, cuts to Medicaid, cuts to other public health programs. And Senator Paul's budget, well, you guessed it, you're right. He would give even more tax breaks to the 1% and to the billionaire class. And I got to applaud his honesty for coming forward and putting his vision on paper. Unfortunately, it is the vision of many, many people in the Republican Party. But it turns out that on one of the most important matters facing the American people, Democrats, Republicans, independents, progressives, moderates, and conservatives are all united. And they are united on the need to take on the outrageous corporate greed in the pharmaceutical industry and to substantially lower the incredibly high prices we pay for prescription drugs in this country. On that issue, the American people are quite united. Today, millions of Americans are forced to make the unacceptable choice between feeding their families or buying the medicine they need to ease their pain or to stay alive. Seniors from Vermont to Alaska are forced to split their pills in half because they don't have enough money to fill their prescriptions. Madam President, all over this country, every state in this country, the American people are asking some pretty simple questions. They want to know, how does it happen that in the United States we pay by far, not even close, the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs? How does that happen? Why is it, people are asking, that nearly 1 out of every 4 Americans cannot afford the prescriptions that their doctors write? Think about how crazy that is. People walk into a doctor's office to get a diagnosis. Doctor writes out a script. They can't afford to fill that prescription. They get sicker. Maybe they end up in the emergency room. Maybe they end up in the hospital. Maybe they die. People are asking, how does it happen that nearly half of all new drugs in the United States cost more than $150,000 a year? $150,000 a year. How does it happen that in Canada and other major countries, same exact medications manufactured by the same exact companies are sold for a fraction of the price that we pay in America? Simple question. Question Democrats, Republicans, Independents, everybody wants an answer to that. Well, the truth is that the answer to that question, in my view, is not complicated. And in fact, it can be summed up in just 3 words, and that is unacceptable corporate greed. Unacceptable corporate greed.